Paulo Freire, he's an educational theorist. Well, first, an introduction. This is about popular education, okay? Democracy in education. Sort of alternative teacher training, but we don't need alternative teacher training if we can get democracy in universal education. I believe in universal education, but teacher training school is about management and oppression and repression, and it's not about democracy. There's no democracy with them amongst the teachers, and therefore, since they're not learning democracy, they're not teaching by example democratic processes and structures to the students. So, quote Paulo Freire, he's the one that just totally changed my life. He's really boring, but I found reading him worthwhile. It was painstaking, but I did find it worthwhile. And he says that you got the oppressors and you got the oppressed. And then you have the revolutionary equalist. But the oppressors and the oppressed need each other, at least they think so in their own mind, because they have a fear of freedom. They're scared to be free. So Paulo Freire says, this then is the great humanistic and historical task of the oppressed, to liberate themselves and their oppressors as well. So I'm just going to stick with that, because that just means that we both need to be free. I don't want to be a master. I don't want to be a slave. And that's Abraham Lincoln. And then Nelson Mandela, he says that mine and your freedom is inseparable. My freedom and your freedom is the same thing. You cannot have a contract between two equals or two unequal people. You cannot have somebody, like a slave. If I was in the back in the antebellum days of the South, if I'm a master, I cannot make a slave sign some contract. That's not a fair contract, because I could beat the crap out of them, right? And so, and vice versa, it wouldn't work. So my freedom and your freedom is inseparable. So that's the great humanistic and historical task of the oppressed, to liberate themselves and their oppressors. The same thing Nelson Mandela says. This whole quote, I'll read the last line. It says, that's why the dispensers of false generosity become desperate at the slightest threat to their force. So they're scared, right? If there's any threat, I just said I was questioning authority, and some insecure educators were terrified that I said something like that. Like, what? You question it? Oh my God, it's finally happened. And maybe they don't like what I'm saying, but if you're secure in what it is that you're doing, I know some people don't want to hear that their entire lives have been for naught, and the reason, their entire life has been wasted because they've been manipulating people their entire lives. They're not liberating people, they're oppressing people. And when you oppress people, you're manipulating them. And if these educators, so-called educators, are manipulating people, they're manipulating the students in the class. They're going to be manipulated for the rest of their lives, thinking by taking orders from people that's the way to be successful. And I can't believe people haven't called this out. Like, how can you expect people to be leaders and captains of industry when you're teaching them to be a slave? Shut up, sit down, do as I tell you. And so they, learn all the facts and information you forced upon them. But does that facts and information, does that help in their lives? Can they talk to anybody about those, ideas, or is it just to pass your stupid test? Franz Fanon and Stephen Biko. Franz Fanon was, I forget the African country, and actually I need to look this up, but he says he's a freedom fighter in some African nation that was trying to overthrow the French colonization. And he was just kind of pointing out, my point of pointing out all these quotes is really just to show that I'm anti-hierarchy, and it shows the biggest thing when it comes to being anti-hierarchy is that I believe hierarchy destroys relationships. So go back to the plantation, you got Massey, you got the slaves. Well, if the two slaves want to get together, say like Django and his wife, they want to get together. Well, Massey says, well, I don't want you to do that. So he takes Django's, wife away, and eventually, she's like hidden in the cellar. So that is the massa forcing the slaves to not be friends, to not get together. That is, that's a hierarchy not working. And I got some more examples, but I'm going to go through these quotes first. So this quote says, the colonial man will manifest this aggressiveness which has been deposited in his bones against his own people. Because of the oppression of the French oppressor, they can't do crap to the oppressor, so they hate each other. This is the period when the niggers beat each other up, and the police and magistrates do not know which way to turn when faced with the astonishing waves of crime in North Africa. The settler keeps alive in the native an anger which he deprives of an outlet. The native is trapped in the tight links of the chains of colonialism. The native's muscular tension finds outlet regularly in bloodthirsty explosions, in tribal warfare, and feuds between septs, and then quarrels between individuals, while the settler or the policeman has the right the livelong day to strike the native, to insult him, and to make him crawl to him. You will see the native reaching for his knife at the slightest hostile glance cast on him by another native. So that's, if you didn't, you should just understand it. But like, if basically the slaves can't do anything to the massa, and instead of actually in solidarity grouping together and confronting the oppressor, they would rather attack each other. And they do that. This is called horizontal violence. That's what Paulo Freire calls it, horizontal violence. And it's for them to feel human. When you're being oppressed, people take away your freedom, and when your freedom is gone, you can't be human. And when you can't be human, you don't have ethics or a conscience or ambition or your history, your thoughts. None of it matters. You're not a person. You're just an object to be manipulated and controlled. So once you've been dehumanized, the way that the slaves feel human again is by attacking one another. Then that goes to the quote right below that: is the most powerful, potent weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. If the mind of the oppressed doesn't see the oppressor as being bad, because you got Uncle Tom House Negroes out here who sit there and see the oppressor as, why do we want to run away from this? Where else can we have it so good? When you're still a slave, you're still being oppressed, right? And so as long as the mind of the oppressed do not understand that they're being oppressed, and it doesn't matter. That goes to Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman, she says that she could have rescued so many more slaves if they had known that they were slaves. This is, de facto, this is real slavery, right? So this is real slavery. The slaves in real slavery with the whip and the abuse didn't even know that they were slaves. So when you look at the wage slaves out here today, at all the businesses and corporations, you're a wage slave. That's what you are. You don't know it? Well, you are. That's exactly what you are. So next quote is Frederick Douglass. This is right after he got into a fight with the slave breaker, Mr. Covey. And Mr. Covey was a slave breaker. He would break the slaves, break their spirit to where they would just be objects. They would come over here with all that African pride, and you would have to break it out of them. And so that's what Mr. Covey would do. But eventually Frederick Douglass had enough. Just like that Australian kid with that bully just picks him up and power bombs him. That's not exactly how the fight goes down, but you could read My Bondage and My Freedom on your own time. But after that fight, he realized that if he would have allowed Mr. Covey to beat and whip him, Mr. Covey would have beat and whipped him until the day that he died. And so when you're being obedient to somebody else, when you're listening to their being shitty, that's what I feel like the major classroom tactic is. You can threaten to call their parents, threaten to send them to ISAP, you can humiliate them. There's lots of different ways for classroom. You can't cuss, right? You can't say, hey, fuck you. Even though that's the meaning behind the words, right? So it's like, hey, shut up, sit down, because you're a nobody. Right, so fuck you, shut up, sit down. But as long as you don't say fuck you, you're in the clear. You can tell them, give them any order that you want to, and it's rude. Ordering people around is rude, and frankly, I think you should be allowed to say fuck you. You can kiss my ass. If you're gonna sit there and order me around like a dog, I'm not a dog. Fuck you, kiss my ass. Now do my order. I ordered you to do something. Now you got to do my order. Oh, you ain't gonna kiss my ass? Well, then I'm not gonna shut up and sit down. And then I don't know, even if you did kiss my ass, I don't know, if you kiss my ass, I might think about shutting up and sitting down. But probably not. So he's, after he beat up Mr. Covey, the slave breaker, he says that human nature is so constituted that it cannot honor a helpless man. It can pity him, and even this it cannot do long if the signs of power do not arise. So if you just keep on beating somebody up over and over again, they won't even give a crap. They will never care. You can pity them for only so long, but then eventually if they don't say, hey, enough is enough, then nobody gives a damn. So this quote is, I've thought about this quote so many times. It's the most powerful argument that I have against not just traditional rigid education, but any other forms of education that allows a little bit of freedom and pretends that that little bit of freedom is real freedom. So he says that it's still patronizing. As a matter of fact, it's worse than the most worst traditional and rigid of other schools. Traditional schools that are rigid, at least 90% of the people who go there hate them and they know the enemy. A school that is letting you, allowing you to have a little bit of freedom seduces you into thinking that a little bit of freedom when you're really being manipulated is the real thing. And that opens you up to being manipulated all your motherfucking life. That's Daniel Greenberg with the emphasis that I added. But Daniel Greenberg, he's from the Sudbury Valley School, and Sudbury Valley School is one of the few democratic schools that we have in the United States of America. It's private, privately owned. I think it's like $7,000 a year, which is actually cheaper than what the public school education pays per student. And for every person that goes to public school, every school gets so many dollars from the state. The state, even in the poorest schools in Kentucky, get $8,000 or $9,000. Anchorage gets about $18,000. The Catholic school, I think they charge maybe about $3,000 or $4,000 a year. So I think Sudbury school model would be way better. So I'm not for alternative education in theory, or like in theory I am, but I want the universal education, the public school education that we have, to be democratic. And just because you have an alternative teaching, alternative school, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be more democratic. In fact, it could become more draconian. It could become worse. And so it doesn't matter if it's alternative or universal education. It just needs to be democratic. And if it requires a charter school to be democratic for the universal education to finally catch on and say, well, maybe we should stop treating our students like like dogs, and start treating them like human beings, so they'll be strong and capable and have a good mind for themselves, then then we have to go with the charter schools. But I would like for it to actually just us fix it ourselves, just because we know that it's ridiculous. So this I kind of go into the whole system. I believe we have a 3-tiered Prussian industrial system. Hornsman in 1843 goes to Prussia, liked it so much, gets it adopted here. And where the Prussians got their entire point of their system was after 1806, the French had conquered them, and the French troops were dying willy-nilly and just throwing themselves into the fields of battle for Napoleon, because they were fighting under the banner, or at least the illusion, of the French Revolution. So they felt like they was doing something good for the entire world. But the French, who were not fighting for revolution, who were fighting for the kings and the queens, they're running off the battlefield because they wanted to live. And the Prussians said, well, we can't have that. We need to figure out a way to make sure that the German people will be happy to die for the kings and queens. And so they established an education system which achieves that. And there's it's a 3-tiered social stratified system. The top 0.5% are going to be the future policymakers. They attended academy schooling, the academy, right? So, and then you have the next 5 to 5% that attended real schooling, and they were going to be just for the engineers, architects, doctors, lawyers, civil servants. But the 94% of the population goes to Volksschooling, where they just learned, rudimentary sort of lessons, but just obedience, cooperation, and the correct attitudes. So you're only going to have a small, tiny middle class and a vast, big working class population of just a bunch of stupids, do as you're told. But the top 0.5%, those are going to be the rulers and the people that actually know what's going on. So only the top 0.5% in the Prussian education model was actually getting any a true education. All the rest of them were being taught to be obedient. Only even the middle class, so even your doctors, lawyers, career civil servants, engineers, architects, all those people would, they would learn how to solve problems, but just at the level to where they could do the jobs, but to never protest it. And actually, if you could pay them a decent wage, that's also more, that's like a house Negro, right? A house Negro says, why do we want to run away when we eat such good food and have such good clothing? Why do we want to, be free? The industrial age, When you see the bells and the rigid class structures, it all comes from the industrial age because we were supposed to work in the factories. So that's when education became real important, was when the industrial age came up. So I believe that freedom and democracy is good. Morality and obedience are the opposites. When one is obedient, they do as they're told, regardless of whether orders are right or wrong. When one is moral, they do what is right and good, for goodness sake, no matter what they're told. So they're the exact opposites. And so when you take away a person's humanity, you take away their ability to decide right from wrong. Just shut your damn mouth and do as you're told. Well, no, I actually want to think about, if this is good or bad. So I want to deviate a little bit from the PowerPoint and just want to talk about the hierarchy. So I'm anti-hierarchy, and I think it destroys relationships. And I was talking about that with the how the slaves attack each other. So because the massa, the dictator, the autocratic teacher is in the room, none of the students inside that room can have a relationship, at least not while that classroom is going. If their love is strong enough, maybe they can endure. I've seen boyfriend and girlfriends go to class and get yelled at, but if they sat next to each other, they could kind of whisper here and there. But I've been in, I don't know, I've lost relationships. We'd be talking, then the teacher comes in, we just have to shut up, and then it's like a weird ass show. They just pretend to be somebody else. And directly, if you talk to your one of the students, hey, shut up, keep your mouth shut. I'm starting class, so you shut your mouth. And it's like, oh, okay, that's wonderful. And so they destroyed a relationship. That literally destroys it. But I have some other fictional movies examples, and then I got one good one. So let's see, one non-fictional, one true example. So in let's see, Noah, Allie, and Noah. So in the Notebook, right, the romantic film, The Notebook, Allie and Noah are falling in love, but eventually Allie's parents tells Noah, sit down, and then they go in the other room and they're sitting there arguing about him, calling him trash and stuff, and then he walks out of the house and he's like, you know what, they're right, I can't do nothing, and he's like feeling sad for himself, and he preemptively breaks up with her, and then she breaks up, and then she's all sad. It's a sad scene, but the point is, Noah was obedient to the father. Come in, he was like, sit down, boy, right? And he sits down while they're sitting there calling him trash in the other room. Should have been like, nah, fuck you, I'm taking my woman with me right now. And gone. So that's the breakup of Allie and Noah was due to hierarchy. Winston and Julia in the book 1984. Winston is the main protagonist. He's part of the thought police, who's actually rewriting history to, delete people's entire existence. But eventually he starts questioning the whole system, and he falls in love with this revolutionary woman named Julia, who uses her, seduces him into the revolution. But eventually they both get tortured at the very end of the book, and they turn on each other. So they tortured Winston to the point where he shouts that he wanted the torture to happen to Julia. They was going to put these rats on him, and that was his biggest fear that he's ever had, was to have rats, eating at his face, since they're carnivorous. And I guess even the Imperial Chinese used to use that as a torture tactic. But he was so scared of those rats, and when they started getting closer and closer to his face, he's like, no, I don't want that to happen to me. Do it to Julia. Do it to Julia. And when he said it, that broke him. He ceased to love her. Once they made him say that he did not love her, he actually meant it. So they got into, he didn't just lie, but he actually meant it. They got into his heart and his chest and his soul. And so enough torture, enough pressure, enough coercion and intimidation, you can change the actual makeup of a person and break, their feelings of love for other people. The other example that I have is in Full Metal Jacket, what they did with Gomer Pyle. They're belittling him and sitting there making fun of him, and then eventually they got the drill sergeant got all the other people to beat the crap out of him. They took like these soap bars and they put it in these towels, and they just whacked the crap out of him while he was sleeping. And so that was the dictator, the drill sergeant, telling all of his peers to beat the shit out of them. And then that's what they were going to do, right? Because you have to smash people into compliance instead of saying, hey, you can do it, and encouraging them and fighting, by his side and shit. Instead, they just said, fuck it. We're going to beat the crap out of him. Then he loses his mind, because not only is he being abused by the drill sergeant, but he's being abused by all of his peers. And so, what's the point, right? So he loses his mind, starts talking to his gun, then he eventually shoots the drill sergeant. So that's the three fictional cases. The other case that I have is Henry Ford, right? So the other one, the Frederick Douglass was a real example, but the Henry Ford says blacks and whites have to be separated. They cannot work in the same factories because if they were together, they could unionize and protest them, and he wanted to divide and conquer them. So Henry Ford separating the factories, segregating the factories, that was intentionally done so that way blacks and whites would not unionize together. And when blacks and whites do start to, get together, now every group, when more groups get together and start demanding what they want, then eventually I think we'll see freedom. I see a rainbow coalition for the revolution. It would be a rainbow, Rainbow Rebellion. So that's why I think hierarchy, it destroys relationships. I think it's ridiculous. Before, when you take away a person's humanity, that's why they attack each other. That's what Franz Fanon was saying. And when you take away their freedom, you're taking away their humanity. So rationalization follows behavior. Once you take away their humanity and then you say, go do this, go do that, that's why both the oppressor and the oppressed are to blame for, the issues that the oppressor does. If the oppressed goes along with the oppressors, say like the Germans in Hitler's Nazi Germany, just following orders wasn't a good enough excuse. But we in the school system says the oppressors say you must follow my orders just because. And they do not ask for the consent of the governed, they just order them around like they're dogs. Right, so they were appointed monarchists who are given commands to your children. They don't actually care about them. So when you take away their humanity, you take everything away. You take away their conscience, their empathy, ethics, spirit, their ability to make decisions, their sense of justice and wonder, their ambition, their history, past experiences, their thoughts, curiosity, morality, their soul, their freedom, their dignity, their heart, brain, body, and their democratic virtues. Democracy. We need to have some democracy in America. There is no democracy. Where is it? If there's democracy in America, please, somebody tell me, where is this democracy at? Because I don't see any democracy. There's no democracy in our workplaces. There's no democracy in our houses. There's no democracy in the school systems. Where is it at? Is it in the creeks? Is it in the trees? Where's this democracy that we're exporting overseas? It's not even in our political establishment. This year we have a big Senate race, but there's all these judges that's making millions of dollars. You have all these in any off election, midterm election or a primary. I've seen a primary that had 10% turnout rate. So this year you probably see a 60% turnout rate. That's still not enough, right? It's still not the people, all the people, but it's a majority. But most elections in Kentucky is way less than the majority. I saw a primary that had 10%. 10%. I think last year was 12%, so 12, 13, 14%. This is not democracy. This is ruled by the minority, ruled by the few people that actually get out to go vote. And then, do you think those people know what they're doing, or are they just being manipulated by the television ads? And so, that's democracy is ruled by the people. When it comes to, even in our political establishment, the people, 90% of the people are staying home. So the demos is not ruling our government. It's an oligarchy, and it's an oligarchy it's an oligarchical plutocracy, right? It's a government run by a small group of people who's out just for the rich and the wealthy. Excuse me. Okay, so democracy. We need to get some democracy. Freedom is good. I don't know why I have to sit there and scream this out to the mountaintops. Freedom is good. It's good for me. It's good for you. It's good for everybody. And when you get a bunch of free, people that recognize their sacred sovereign autonomy in a group, then it has to go into a democracy. There's no way you can get a group of freedom-loving people and they say, well, let's all just listen to the dictator. No, Windows. Okay, 4 hours, fine. Let's listen. Let's hurry up and listen to the dictator, right? No, it's democracy. So freedom for a group of people, logically, it'll become democracy. So, but while I say democracy, I'm not saying chaos. I'm not saying, let's just everybody do whatever they want. Freedom is do whatever you please, but you can't hurt other people. So my freedom, whatever floats my boat but doesn't sink yours. Whatever my freedom, I should be allowed to be as free as I want to be, and as long as it doesn't infringe upon your freedom. And so those are the barriers, right, for my individual freedom. But if we all get into a classroom, we all get into a workplace or a home or a group of people anywhere, and we want to employ democratic virtues, then there will have to be some structure to it, because only one person can speak at a time. Then eventually a decision is made, and then actions happen, right? So that all has to be worked out. And our American democracy, we got 3 branches of government, and there's supposed to be a balance of power between the 3. So we can work on all those details in all those respective spheres. But in the school system, there is no better, more perfect place than to practice democracy in a school system. Democracy, what is it? It's not just voting. What is it? There's a whole bunch of things that democracy comes with. Democracy, it's about being deliberative. It's about being able to make an argument, to be able to stand up for what you believe in, and to be able to disagree without being disagreeable. We can respect each other. So we can, I make an argument, try to convince you of what it is that I'm trying to say. You make an argument, try to convince everybody else. And then eventually, there's a vote and a decision. So we respect each other. We could share in the decision makings. We could decide the classroom arrangements for ourselves, and we could decide for the curriculum that we want to study for ourselves. So there's lots of democratic structures. I did all this lesson plan. I'm doing a sort of, it's becoming longer, but I did this, for my classroom management class, and they did a bunch of presentations, and all the presentations that they had elements of democracy. They were talking about study circles and jigsaws and Vygotsky's zone of proximal development and scaffolding. I feel like even with in teacher training schools, there's no democracy there. But how easy would it be to get a bunch of teachers to assign each one of us a chapter to read, to lecture, and then we all learn. So you learn more by the lectures. When you teach others, you memorize 90% of that which you teach. So when you can get people teaching each other, more learning is happening, more retention is happening. When you're just lecturing at people, they'll only retain 5% of that. You'll retain 90% of the lecture, but they'll only retain 5%. And so if nobody else is teaching, that means the class is only 5% as smart as the lecturer is getting. So, really, you shouldn't even listen to what I'm saying. Make your own videos and tell other people that democracy and freedom are good, and that, we need to respect each other, and we need to actually have democratic structures, because in a democratic society, we've got to practice our democratic principles. If we don't practice our democratic principles, then we're going to lose our democracy. We're fighting for freedom and democracy overseas when we don't even have it here. Where is the democracy? You think there's democracy? Why? Because we have an election every once in a while? We give our power away for one moment. That's not democratic processes. It's not democratic virtues. The idea of democratic processes and virtues is that we as a people make the decisions together. So we need to make the decisions together. And when you get into groups of people, people don't respect somebody who's trying to convince them, because they've been told what to do all their lives. When someone tries to convince them, they look like a chump. They look like a pansy. Oh, shut your mouth. What? You just want me to order you around like a dog? Nah, don't order me around. I don't want to be ordered around. I don't see why anybody would want to be ordered around. Who wants to be a dog? And I don't want to be a master either. I don't want to tell somebody what to do. You're grown. You can do what you want to do. Why do I have to put my press down on you to tell you to do the things you're supposed to do? Shouldn't you just know it? And so I don't want to be the master. I don't want to have to sit there and tell a field of slaves that they got to do this and they got to do that. I don't want to do that. And that's why I'm a revolutionary equalist, because I'm my free, independent person. I'm not looking to oppress. I don't want to be oppressed, and I want other people that are like me. I haven't found any yet. So with the different tactics, there is think, pair, and share, cooperative learning, play, gamifications. All these things would work in democratic structures, classroom meetings, and classroom management. So this was a classroom management class. So how do you manage a classroom when you have just everybody doing whatever they want to do? Well, you're not. There's democratic structures, and you can set this entire thing up because you've been planning for 2 or 3 years in teacher training schools, so you could set this entire thing up. But you can also, the classroom meetings, you could say, well, we have this discipline problem. What should we do as a class in order to solve it? And the class might, they might choose ostracization or, some other things. So I'm just saying that there's options out there. Instead of just saying the dictator says they got to do it like this and everybody's got to listen, you always got to press on them and you never let up on them. That's exhausting. I have no idea how people can do that all the time, and that's why people are miserable. That's why you got these old ass teachers that are just absolutely mean spirited and hate filled, and they're just shitty people. They'll roll their eyes at you and pretend like your words don't really matter, that you're nobody, and we're just supposed to go along with them as if that's really fucking the way it's supposed to be, and it's not. If we want to be able to keep our democratic society. I hope I'm not alone in liking freedom and democracy. It feels like I am. But if we want to keep this democratic society, then we've got to practice democratic virtues. So, of course, it's a virtue. We liberate ourselves, each other, that respect everybody. I already mentioned all that stuff. And so at the very end, I got this Jean-Jacques Rousseau quote. And it's essentially saying what I just said. If the teacher training schools, we still sitting in the class and they're still teaching and talking at us as monologuists. There's no dialogue, and we're still being obedient, sit down, shut up students. And so we're being a slave. And they're sitting there telling us that if we listen to all their old marching orders and that we're the slave, then eventually we'll get to be the master. And maybe, if you go through the process and they can cut you out to be a heartless, psychopathic bastard that just doesn't care about other people's feelings, that just, you've been smashed by the teacher trainers, and then you're going to go into the school system and you're going to smash them, and everybody's just smashing everybody and nobody's respecting anybody. If that's the goal, then fuck that, because I think that's total bullshit. And I think that is the idea, because to sit there and tell people to sit down and shut up, and somehow by sitting down and shutting up, that's going to make you stand up and speak up? No, that makes no sense. It's like, here, ride this bike by watching me ride the bike, and I'm going to take the bike home, and then you learn how to figure out how to get a bike, and if you get a bike, then maybe you can ride it on your own some other day, some other time in, some other century. I don't care, because it's just all what you do. And I got the bike, right? So me riding the bike in front of y'all, how does that teach anybody anything? It doesn't teach anybody anything except for me. It just, I get better and more honed in my biking skills, and so I look like an expert at my subject. Look, I know how to ride the bike. I do this, and do that, and then the final exam is I'm gonna put you on the bike and then see how you ride and see if you do well enough on it. And maybe if you spend enough time outside of class, you might be able to get on that bike and actually start to ride it well. But that's, why not just get the students to ride the bike inside the classroom? And you can't do a bike in a classroom, so maybe we need to take the classroom outside. We don't need to have the classes in the street, have classes in the homes and in the coffee shops and everywhere, right? Democratic structures should be everywhere, and it should be commonplace, right? Talking about politics in America is somehow impolite. No, it's not impolite. It should be water cooler talk. It should be constant. That's what we should do, like all the time. So this is a Jean-Jacques Rousseau quote. I just discovered Jean-Jacques Rousseau within the year, and it's absolutely amazing. When it comes to the great debate from the enlightenment of the human nature, how are we as human beings? Either we're bloodthirsty and we're all evil, and you need a powerful Leviathan state to smash everybody down, because we're all going to be evil if you don't have someone smashing us down. Well, that's one theory. That's what Hobbes says. But you got Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and he says, no, that's not the case. We're born good. Yes, there's evil and good in everybody, but you're born good. And if you, as a parent who's raising a child, how can you not, know exactly what he's going to do? If you plan and plot it out to exactly how he was going to be raised, how would you? It makes no sense. It makes no sense to sit there and say that you want to smash them in order to get them to compelled and comply to all that you say. So they're just an obedient, stupid slave. You need to make them strong, and they need to know who they are and what's going on. And by making them strong, that'll make them good. Because if you're able to do a lot of things, then you're able to do, if you're able to do a lot of things, then you won't want to. I don't know. I mean, if Hitler would not have been able to control the masses if everybody had their own mind. And so not only does it, maybe being strong might not make you good, but it won't make you obedient to where you're following some evil person's orders. Just do as I say because you're supposed to be evil, or you're supposed to be obedient. And that's unfortunately all that we need for evil to exist, is for good people to do nothing. So that's why you got to make good people strong, and we're born good. We're born. So that's the two theories of human nature. We'll never actually know what human nature is like, but the theories that stem from your ideas of human nature. If you just think everybody's a bunch of evil people, then you'll want to smash them, right? You'll identify with the Nazis and with the state. But if you think that people are good and there's an inherent quality that's in them that's worth saving and that's worth strengthening and making better, then you listen to Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So he's essentially saying, yeah, for the first 12 years, I'm going to let my kid do whatever he wants to do, with only one rule, and that's to never do any harm to other people. He said only one book he would try to get them to read, and that would be Robinson Crusoe, but no more. Past that, once he's invoked that curiosity about the world, go out and discover and figure out what it is that you want to do with yourself. And so, if since everybody's gonna be a parent most of the time, I think not everybody, but a lot of people are gonna be parents or educators or whatever. If you know that's what you're going to do, you can plan for it. So he says, the poor baby knowing nothing, is he not at your mercy? Can you not arrange everything in the world which surrounds him? Can you not influence him as you wish? His work, his play, his pleasures, his pains, are not all these in your hands, and without his knowing? Doubtless he ought to do only what he wants, but he ought to do only what you want him to do. He ought not take a step which you have not foreseen. He ought not to open his mouth without your knowing what he will say. And so he's saying, let the child do what they want to do. But if you're the parent or the educator, you could set the entire thing up. So as a future educator myself, there's going to be democratic structures there. They're going to care about themselves. They're going to speak up, and they're going to be proud of what they say. And I'm going to teach them to stand up for themselves and to not be rude and not to be disrespectful. Don't go around hurting anybody, but do try to be persuasive. Do talk to each other. Do build up relationships. And sharing the decision makings. Get some power for yourself. Go after the big money. Do something good for the world. That is going to be, that is what I'm going to do as a future educator. And it's going to suck because I'm going to go into a school and most people are not going to be doing that. And they won't see how my scores are so high because I allow them to be free. And they won't get it. But it only makes sense to me that when they freely choose to start to learn, calculus or geography or Native American history, whatever subject I teach, when they freely choose to start studying that type of stuff, then they'll be lifelong learners. If you can't even get the curiosity, you're basically dragging a dead horse to go drink, right? Hey, dead horse, come here, go drink. Well, you could force a horse that fights you the whole time and put water in its mouth, and it'll keep fighting you, and maybe it might get a drop or something, maybe. But like if it just knows how to get a drink of water, it's going to be thirsty and it's going to get a drink of water. Whenever it needs a drink of water, it doesn't need someone commanding them in order to do it. So that's my presentation. Much longer. I get to actually explain every bit of it, and I didn't cuss as much, and there was less anger, so maybe people will watch this more. Also, I got pictures, right? You get to see not just me kind of, saying this and saying that. You actually get to see words on a screen and Jean-Jacques Rousseau's picture. Maybe that'll make it better. I don't know. And I'm actually talking, I don't know. I think it's more conversational, so I'm open for dialogue. That's the point of really all the things that I'm putting out there is for dialogue. And no, I don't want people just agreeing with me, but if you do agree with me, that would be nice. Hey, that's really good points that you made. And if you disagree with me, tell me why, and then we'll have a conversation from there. But yeah, to just allow the oppressors and the oppressed. It's not just a bunch of bosses and workers out here. There's a middle ground. I don't want to be a slave and I don't want to be a master. I want to be an Abraham Lincoln. I want to be a Tecumseh or Jean-Jacques Rousseau or my own individual, my own person. And I want you to be your own individual, your own person. And I want that dialogue to take place. So anyways, Jonathan Masters, Viva la Revolution.